So literally yesterday, I was just saying, all these guys are at the beginning of their career. This thing will twist and turn several times before we actually get to the end. So while a lot of the players had not so great news this week, I wouldn't give up on them just yet. It's still stupid early. And bro, it reigns so true for the subject of today's video. We all know that generally speaking, athletes are gonna have 4 years of eligibility in college sports. So imagine a collegiate athlete having not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 season-ending injuries, the same amount of season-ending injuries that most college athletes have seasons. If this happened to you, what would be going through your mind? Maybe it's time to pick another career path, or maybe, just maybe, it's time to create a whole new position in the National Football League. Yeah, let's go with that one. Cue the Wayne. Before Taysom Hill would ever become the Swiss Army knife for the Saints, he was showing off his versatility at Highland High School in Idaho. Now you may have guessed that with a dynamic athlete such as Taysom Hill, of course he played multiple sports in high school, including basketball, track, and obviously football. Now outside of football, his best sport was track, where he ran the 200-meter relay, the 200-meter solo race, and he was probably best known for his ability as a long jumper. And while that's cool and all, it doesn't quite compare to what he was able to accomplish on the gridiron. As a senior, he won Gatorade Player of the Year, passing for 2,200 yards while rushing for just under 1,500. This man was responsible for 42 touchdowns that year, as he did it all for his team. Taysom had offers from multiple D1 schools, including Stanford, Arizona, Boise, Utah, and BYU. Taysom had every intention of attending Stanford, as he verbally committed to the university, but he ultimately changed his mind and ended up attending BYU instead. Now the common misconception is that when Jim Harbaugh, who recruited Taysom, decided to go to the NFL to coach the 49ers, Taysom backed out of his verbal commitment, but the decision had more to do with Taysom's religion. See, Taysom served as a Mormon missionary from 2009 to 2011. So during those 2 years, he was stationed in Sydney, Australia. Now Stanford initially wanted him to leave early so that he could come in during the normal enrollment time, which is in June. Now Taysom's mission didn't end until December, and so for him, that just wasn't an option. Stanford said, okay, cool, I know you're leaving December, but you won't be able to report until next June. This didn't work for Taysom either, and it's not like he didn't have any other options. This is where BYU comes in. BYU allowed Taysom to come in that January. They put him on scholarship immediately, and that was that. Now, of course, BYU is owned by the same church organization that Taysom belongs to, so yeah, it just made sense. I mean, 88% of male students at BYU either delay enrollment or just take a hiatus at some point to go on their, their missionary. So obviously, given his religious background, this was the perfect fit for Taysom. In 2012, as a freshman, Taysom Hill started out as a gadget player with BYU coaches looking to utilize his versatility. And we're not just talking passing, catching, running, returning. This cat even served as a part-time punter. It seems like there's no facet of football that this dude isn't at least competent in. Then on his very first collegiate pass, he throws an 18-yard touchdown. Now it didn't take Taysom long to take the starting job, and once he got it, he didn't look back. So through 6 games with only 2 stars, mind you, Taysom had completed 42 passes for 425 yards and 4 TDs while rushing for 336 yards and another 4 TDs on the ground. But then Taysom got his first taste of just horrible luck. He suffered his first season-ending injury versus Utah State. Now please, remember that team. Utah State. Now the short version of this is Taysom tore his LCL out for the season. The longer version of that story is even more unlucky. Plenty of players tear their LCL or MCL or something in their knee, right? Well, this injury happened while Taysom was at quarterback. We're talking the last play of the game, and get this, Taysom's team was up by 3. Apparently, a signal came in from the sideline that calls for the victory formation. He was supposed to take a knee. I don't know if he didn't get the signal, if he ignored the signal, or what happened. He doesn't take a knee. He runs the ball instead. Boom, tears up his knee. Season done. on a play that never should have been run in the first place. A completely pointless play. Completely pointless play, man. That's crazy. The following year, 2013, BYU finally saw what Taysom could be. As a full-time quarterback, he started in 13 games, leading BYU to an 8-5 record. Taysom filled up the stat sheet, throwing for 2,900 yards with 19 touchdowns. He also ran for 1,300 yards with another 10 TDs. And when you see those stats alone, it's pretty impressive. What those stats don't tell you is that Taysom was wildly inefficient. He only completed 54% of his passes. And sure, he threw 19 touchdowns, but he also threw 14 interceptions. That's a pretty bad ratio. Either way, Taysom gained a ton of experience and had an opportunity to grow as a player. Come next season, it was time for a Taysom takeover. Now, Taysom started his junior campaign out on fire, raising his completion percentage from 54 up to 67%, and through 5 games he already had nearly the same amount of rushing touchdowns as he'd had his entire sophomore season. He led BYU to a 4-0 start, beating teams like Texas, Houston, and Virginia. But week 5 would pit Tatum against an old foe, Utah State. This was the same team that Taysom had gotten hurt against his freshman year and lost the rest of his season. It was time for some payback, or maybe not. Midway through the second quarter, history would repeat itself as Taysom got his leg rolled under and snapped his left leg. After x-rays, it was confirmed that his leg had been fractured and his season, once again, was over. At this point, I'm sure Taysom had to do some soul searching. He had suffered 2 season-ending injuries in 3 years against the same damn team, bro. But he decided he wasn't done. He was gonna keep fighting. There was nothing that was gonna stop Taysom from achieving his full potential as a football player. So he strapped him up and got with it. He regained his starting spot and looked forward to the future with the utmost optimism. He began the 2015 season older, wiser, but just as unlucky as ever, as he injured his foot in the first damn game of the season. And not just any foot injury, a Liz Frank fracture. This is where one or more of your metatarsals become displaced from the torus. Injury like that, oh yeah, that's the season. Again. Now to recap real quick, that's 3 season-ending injuries. And if you've never had a serious injury, let me kind of put this in your head. It's not like you just get hurt, time pass, you're back. No. First, you got to decide whether or not you need surgery. After that, there's the normal recovery period, which is usually like somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks or something like that, just depending on the severity of the injury. Then you have the rehab, which is one of the most painful and just damn near depressing things as an athlete. And the reason it's so depressing is because you know where you were and now you can barely do this simple exercise without excruciating pain and probably crazy fatigue. So it's hard to imagine yourself going back from this to where you were, but you have to imagine it in order to push through and actually get the most out of your rehab. It sucks, man. And this is the 3rd time Taysom has had to do this. Now keep in mind, this injury took place during the first game of Taysom's senior season. So during the beginning of the rehab process, he's still awaiting word from the NCAA to let him know that he's gonna be able to get a medical red shirt. NCAA has a lot of rules and stuff, and while it seems like it's a no-brainer, it's never a no-brainer with the NCAA. So as if all of that isn't heavy enough, during this offseason, Taysom ends up losing his older brother. His big bro Dexter suddenly passed back in their hometown in Idaho. And as a guy who has a brother, I cannot imagine, bro. I can't imagine. And again, it's not like there's something that he could have even attempted to prepare for. His brother was a seemingly healthy guy. He was 6 years older than Taysom. He had played college football, man. He was a linebacker at Arizona State. Seemed like a healthy, happy, normal guy. Suddenly passes away. Lot to deal with, bro. A little bit of time passes and Taysom is granted his medical red shirt to get 1 more year at BYU. He had gone there in 2011 and it was now 2016 and he'd only played 1 full season. But as far as Taysom was concerned, it was time to change all that. He was more determined than ever. He changed his number from 4 to 7 to honor his older brother, and he decided to channel that pain to get through yet another season. And this time, Taysom did something he hadn't done since 2013. he played in all 12 regular season games. Now his numbers weren't great compared to his 2013 numbers. He had 2,300 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 11 picks, 600 yards on the ground, 8 touchdowns, 4 lost fumbles, and while his attempts being way down in every category can explain the production drop off from 2013, I'm assuming the coaches wanted to preserve him and not get him hurt. It doesn't explain his inefficiency. I mean, sure, he completed 60% of his passes, but 12 touchdowns and 11 picks? Bruh. BYU was 7-4 going into their final game of the regular season, but that final regular season game was versus, you guessed it, Utah State. Now, I want to point out real quick that when Taysom graduated a couple of years ago, he could have transferred as a graduate transfer and played at another school. In hindsight, I wonder if he wishes he'd have done that just so he would not have to play Utah State. This was a team that Taysom had already suffered 2 season-ending injuries against. And I don't care what anybody says, there's no way you can go into that game without having that in the back of your head, bro. It's just something about this team. Every time we play, I get hurt. And not only do I just get hurt, I miss the rest of the season. But I guess you could say Taysom had gotten kind of lucky because, you know, this was the last regular season game of the year. So how bad could it really be? I'll be fine. This time is gonna be different. But it wasn't. Early on, things were looking pretty good. BYU was leading, Taysom was playing pretty well, and he'd made it through 3 quarters of play. And he was gonna win this thing and go on to play in the bowl game. He didn't make it. He got hurt, bro. Hyperextended his elbow in the 4th quarter. Now, this injury is not nearly as bad as the knee injury and the foot break, but it was bad enough to prevent Taysom from playing in the bowl game. So once again, bro, for the 3rd time, Utah State has ended Taysom Hill's season. What do they have against this man? It's like the only people who hate Taysom Hill more than Alvin Kamara fantasy owners, Utah State. I mean, bro, they had it out for this man, dog. They just had it out for him. Taysom had finally run out of eligibility, and it was time to try his luck in the NFL. He wasn't a traditional quarterback, so his pro day was especially important. There, the 6'1.5", 230-pound Taysom ran a 4.4 40 and recorded a 38.5-inch vertical. These numbers are obviously extremely impressive, and this was much needed by Taysom, but it wasn't quite enough to get him drafted. Fortunately though, following the draft, the Green Bay Packers gave him a call and offered him a free agent contract, which of course he accepted. Despite having a pretty good preseason, Taysom was waived on September 2nd, 2017. But the very next day, Lady Luck was finally on Taysom's side. His phone rang, and this time, it was the New Orleans Saints, a team coached by one of the more creative offensive coaches in the National Football League, Sean Payton. This was a match made in heaven. Sean Payton has figured out how to utilize Taysom on special teams as both a gunner and a return guy. And recently, he's seen his role expanded into short yardage option quarterback, tight end, and wherever else the Saints decide to use him. Like I said earlier, he gets a ton of hate on Twitter from fantasy football guys who want the Saints running backs to get all of the short yardage touchdowns. These guys are hilarious. Like check this one out. Check this one. This is from last night, right? This dude says, "I'm literally gonna lose my mind when I lose this game. 19 points is all I needed with Kamara and Peterson combined, and I'm still gonna lose. I hate fantasy football. I hate fantasy football. I hate Sean Payton. I hate Taysom Hill. And for no reason at all, I hate you." So again, a lot of fantasy football guys really don't like Taysom Hill. But now that you kind of know what this guy has been through in order to get into the position that he's in, how can you hate on that? He never gave up through tons of adversity and ends up finally landing in a spot that seems perfect for him. It's not very often you see a guy in the NFL playing this many different positions and doing this many different things. Now, Taysom is 28 years old. He's not a young guy. Remember, he had to go to Sydney, Australia for 2 years, and then he was in college for like 6 years. And he's had a lot of injuries in the past, so we got to see how this thing is going to play out. But right now, at least, let that man have his moment. It's well deserved. Click the thumbs up button if y'all enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you're brand new. My name is FlemLo Raps, and I'm gonna holler at y'all next time. One.